So the Me Too movement is still a thing. I know what you're all thinking. How? Hasn't it run its course? Many citing it being nothing more than a glorified populist movement that sought to destroy lives, which it did in some instances. Many remember Asia Argento, Rose McGowan, both of whom were friends at one point having a massive falling out. How about Bourdain? When the Me Too movement was at its peak, the problem was that all the accusations came across as nothing more than salacious. There were a fair few that actually had credibility. There was just too much evidence. Harvey Weinstein is a prime candidate for that. He is now known to have absolutely destroyed lives. However, many have mischaracterized him to an extent, but he's still a bad, shady, slimy, desperate person. Then you have those involved in the movement who sought to use it as a way to exploit it by airing their own grievances and subsequent catfights with other people. There were others who made claims saying that their careers were destroyed by, and then name a celebrity. Let's name Kevin Spacey, someone else who got what some would call Me Too'd, where he was at the peak of his career with House of Cards. He was still doing well, very successful, celebrated. Accusations flood in. He is now blackballed, a pariah, and a number of cases later being dropped against him, he's still not being convicted of any of the charges he's been accused of. Some people simply walking away from making their accusations or continuing down the path of making it a legal accusation, which would require some form of proof, which is where a number of the issues arose with the Me Too movement, because, as I earlier stated, it became something more akin to the court of public opinion as opposed to the court of law. I have and will always believe that if anyone makes a case against somebody or an accusation, you should seek to do it in a courtroom, and that should remain anonymous until a conviction is obtained. If it is not obtained, then the person involved, no matter how public they are, should reserve the right to anonymity. I've always believed this, yet we have seen time and time again people dragged through the mud. Time and time again we've seen people convicted and had the charges overturned, but the only thing people remember are the convictions because no one talks about the fact it was overturned. There were other people involved that kinda got Me Too'd or were brought into it or considered a part of it because they were convicted because they were shady anyway, like Bill Cosby. I don't think he was Me Too'd. I think the charges have been long-standing, and let's not even bother with R. Kelly. He's not been convicted just yet. I mention Me Too, by the way, because it keeps on rearing its ugly head, because it keeps on cropping up. There are people that have condemned it because they believe it no longer serves a purpose other than to virtue signal against claims that have been debunked time and time again. Claims that are usually absurd claims as opposed to the more moderate claims. You have champions like Lena Dunham, the same person who's claimed many different things about sexual harassment, unironically after having done the same thing to her sister. Was it Marbles again? I can't remember. Actors like Sean Penn, to an extent, condemned it by saying we don't know what's a fact in many of the cases. Salacious is as soon as you call something a movement that is really a series of many individual accusers-victim accusations, some of which are unfounded. And that's actually another problem within the Me Too movement. They're just done to destroy lives. The movement's origins was to deal with sexual assault. It was that. It served what I consider to be a reasonable purpose by campaigning in a rather noble way to an extent. But then it was co-opted by people who just wanted to do that. Put people on blast because they didn't get what they wanted or because they had a hate boner for someone. And I'd like to believe after the number of cases that have since been dropped, with very few of the cases still being ongoing, in the sense that there's still more evidence to be obtained, investigations are still continuing, or the courts have yet to make decisions, or hearings have yet to take place, others being dropped because of a lack of evidence or because, as earlier stated, the accuser has decided, yeah, I want none of this. Perhaps after advice from, let's say, a district attorney who felt that they were unable to get a suitable conviction because of possibly a lack of evidence. The reason I have vented for as long as I have is because, again, I noticed another article surfacing of another person championing Me Too. Now, I'm not going to take too much of a dump on the person in question. The actor's name is Chris O'Dowd, an actor from one of my very favourite comedy shows called The IT Crowd, the quintessential geek, and I thought it was a very funny show. He has suggested that Me Too is great for everyone. As men, and this is his words, men have coasted in power for too long and now won't feel the pressure to be aggressive and hide their feelings. This feels like 2015 feminist videos. Toxic masculinity argumentation, in the sense that men are unable to express how they feel. Now, I do actually, to an extent, understand that, because men do like to be more reserved. Because it's interesting there. You mention hide their feelings and pressure to be aggressive, but being aggressive is a feeling. I feel like you don't understand that. With Grissa Dowd believing that the feminist movement can benefit men and women, I'm sure it can, but I firmly believe it doesn't benefit all men and women. Hashtag not all. Because it does the intersectional thing for most that would practice that, focus on those that are considered marginalised and therefore take away from those who are not. But because of how you determine sexism and racism being the structures of power nonsense, as opposed to straight up just discriminating because of something like race, sexuality, gender, and so on, it gets a bit unfair. I firmly believe in equality, by the way, for all, but I don't need a movement for that. I just have common sense and treat people equally. Me Too, by the way, is not great for anyone. At this present time, Me Too, Chris O'Dowd, has destroyed lives. You would know this if you paid any attention to the multitude of accusations that have since vanished because they were bogus. Where's Christine Blasey Ford gone? Anyone seen her? Because she vanished very quickly. I wonder why. Chris O'Dowd continued down his line of thought by saying that men have not benefited from a patriarchal society, so more equality is going to be great for everybody. I fully support equality, as earlier stated, but I support it not by outcome, but by opportunity. In the United Kingdom, we have outcome, in quite a number of instances, in fact, which therefore is not equality, which means people do not benefit from it, unless they are born a certain way, or believe in a certain thing, which is racist, sexist, homophobic, religiously intolerant, the list goes on. Yet these things are endorsed by people who claim to be feminist. It is when you're intentionally discriminating against somebody, what I earlier stated. And I say this as somebody who has been discriminated against because he is male and denied an opportunity in the past, long before I was even on YouTube, because they needed to fill a quota of females, which to me was unacceptable because the person they settled with, they ended up firing 2 weeks later because she wasn't good enough. And they went to me and said, we had to do that. And I turned them down because I can't trust somebody who'd behave like that. It is unacceptable behaviour from anyone. It is unbecoming. As far as the benefiting from patriarchal society goes, I'd like to believe patriarchy, as is perceived by most bedroom feminists of 2015, is less of what it was considered, let's say, 10 years ago. Many will say it's a myth. I don't care. I care less about that than I do the nonsense going on with ContraPoints, and I know exactly zero about that. All I know is, I just don't care. I only care that everyone is treated equally. The Me Too movement did serve, originally, a purpose that was useful, but I don't agree with outing people. That is a bad tactic on a bad target. You've therefore weakened your position by doing that. It could be considered perverting the course of justice, but since you don't go to the police and instead bitch about it with a megaphone to crowds of tens of thousands, I don't think you achieve anything other than destroying someone's livelihood with no evidence to support it. So I don't agree with you that Me Too is great for everyone, Chris. And the evidence to support that is damning. And as far as feminism goes, I don't care about feminism. There are feminists calling out feminists for not actually pushing for equality. They're the ones I like. Not the ones not pushing for equality, the ones calling out the other ones. The ones who have the balls to actually say, yeah, you're a shit feminist. Because the one thing you're doing is being misandrist. Denying certain things that actually happen. For example, many support circumcision still, and yet unironically condemn female genital mutilation. Now the arguments, of course, are what happens physically, the dangers. Yes, but it's still genital mutilation and it should be condemned. I could go through the list, including sexual assault if you wish, since there are male victims, a number of whom came forward with Kevin Spacey. We acknowledge that. It's still not recognised as rape, though, is it? It's quite unusual in that regard. Now, of course, a number of the cases against Kevin Spacey have since been dropped, and he's gone about his usual business of being a very weird person. Perhaps if this was done properly, with investigations, the court of public opinions wouldn't have made this look like an absolute train wreck. I don't agree with mob mentalities going around chastising people for the way they look or exist. It's all quite tragic. Perhaps 2020 couldn't get here too sooner so I could be your president and simply wipe you all out. I know it's a rubbish joke and it's dead, but I'm going to do it anyway, and there will be t-shirts when I start it. Now I'm done talking about this. Chris O'Dowd, you're an idiot. I'll link the article where he talks about this, about patriarchy and people hiding their feelings. No one's hiding their feelings. People are composing themselves. You bellend. Since I'm done with this, I'm streaming tonight, 9:30 PM over on the Moistonia live channel. New video on that channel already, linked to both below. Also new read video on the Moistonia Reads channel. That'll be up at 8 PM GMT tonight. So don't see you on any of that tonight. Hope you all have a lovely Friday and subsequent weekend, and thank you all very much for listening.